Anbernic's RG353P was created to take on the popular Pocket Go S30 that was released in early 2021, and they've used the extra year to really iron out the kinks and add a completely new chip in the hope of bringing former RK3326 customers back to their library of future consoles. The handheld gets noticeably bigger towards the top of the shell, allowing for larger battery capacity, bigger shoulder buttons, and a mini HDMI port. I will say that it's very thick at the top, but the added weight does add to the comfortability when holding it, somehow. As you can see, the bottom is much thinner, allowing space for perfectly located speakers, a headphone jack, and 2 SD card slots, one for firmware and one for your ROMs. Even though it does thin out towards the bottom, I do need to add that this is a thicker than usual handheld. It's in no way slimlined. On the face you are greeted with a classic SNES aesthetic, not only because of the shell design which replicated the controller, but also the coloring of the buttons and the etched design behind them. The screen is a 3.5-inch IPS 640 by 480 touchscreen display. You heard that right, it is in fact touchscreen, which is a new addition to Anbernic's handhelds, a lovely feature which only seems to work when you've loaded up via Android. The screen itself is bright, highly sensitive to touch, which is good, and it's the perfect resolution for playing retro games. On the RG353P you'll also find 2 analog sticks, identical to that of the Nintendo Switch, in a gray color that matches the high-quality, firm DPAD. Overall, I think the design looks nice. It's nothing revolutionary and there's little to no innovation involved because it's been done before, but that doesn't mean I can't like it. Due to its large, weighty nature, it feels great in adults' hands. Everything is easy to get to and I can play on it for hours on end. However, if you're buying it for a kid, it may be a little overwhelming and a bit too big. Well, you'll be glad to know that this is rocking the 1.8 GHz quad-core RK3566 chipset, which slightly outperforms the old RK3326 chip that we are all so familiar with. It also packs a hefty 2 GB RAM. You can dual boot Android and Linux. It has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 4.2 plus a 3500 mAh battery that lasts around about 4 to 5 hours on a single charge depending on what consoles that you are emulating. So on paper, it's actually better than most of Anbernic's affordable handheld devices, and with the added touchscreen display, it seems like a nice step in the right direction. But that's just a personal preference. So, now let's take a look at gameplay quality. I am happy to confirm that this chipset can in fact play PS1, N64, PSP and most Dreamcast games really well. N64 ran incredibly well with little to no hiccups, and I noticed a big difference between quality compared to the average RK3326 handheld. And test on best Dreamcast games, in no way did it perform flawlessly, and some slight drops in frame rates. So I think larger Dreamcast games is the limit for this device, seeing as there were minor hiccups. Which, to be honest, is what I expected from this chip. For your smaller the games, the 4:3 display is an absolute pleasure to play on, and I experienced very little problems with crashes, audio bugs, or screen tearing. One of the coolest features when using the Android port is the fact the Nintendo DS games work with the touchscreen, allowing you to use the second screen naturally by using the RG353P's touchscreen capabilities. Your older games like Game Boy, NES, PS1 and other will work well on here too. It has plenty of RAM to power through older emulation. Even PS1 and PSP work well, so it makes this handheld a reliable purchase for those that want N64 and Dreamcast emulation without having to tinker around with settings. At $140 it is slightly more expensive than your RK3326 handhelds, and seeing as the build quality in par, but has the addition of a new touchscreen, I do think it's priced reasonably, which I was surprised with because, as mentioned before, Anbernic has had a bad few months with product launches. I recommend the RG353P for those that have a RK3326 handheld and want a little power bump with a cool new shell. Should you buy this primarily for the touchscreen? No, absolutely not. They've also designed the product well too, packaging up good build quality with great comfortability, average battery life, and new processor that can handle N64 and most Dreamcast games. Not bad, Anbernic. It's definitely not your best product, but you pulled it out of the bag, which is needed because the community thought the death of Anbernic was just around the corner in that year.